Good morning, everyone. The time being 9 a.m. On Wednesday, November 24th, I'd like to call the King County Finance and Budget Committee meeting to order. Our first order of business, I need a motion and a second or a unanimous consensus. We'll do roll call first.
Ford,
Present.
Martin,
Martin present.
Sanchez,
Sanchez here.
Sturgis,
Yes.
Tepe,
Steppy here.
Pirog, Shepro,
Shepro here.
Berman, Leonard.
Leonard here.
You have a quorum.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask unanimous consent, Sheprov, to place the minutes approved and on file.
Anyone in disagreement with that? So be it then. The minutes are approved. Anyone here for public comment?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
this is perhaps unusual, but it's also a notable occasion. We learned last week that one of our members was having a birthday, and because of the schedule, we were not able to observe it at that time. But at this time, I do have some things to present to John Martin, and with the leave of the committee, I would take a moment or two to do so.
Absolutely. Take all the time you need.
John, in deep appreciation for all you brought to this.
Morning.
Initially, I went in the wrong direction. I know you're always talking about tea times, and I was getting Lapsang Souchong and Earl Grey, and then I thought, no, that's probably not the right idea. So we do have some things here. One is something for those cold days in the morning on the green, or whatever. I'm really old, so I actually know who this guy was. This is a genuine Gary Player.
Oh, wow.
And we also have a nice little plaque says swing big or don't swing at all. And finally, for you to put in a appropriate picture of yourself, the hole-in-one.
That's probably going to go in a drawer and never be used.
And finally, I know that you need a lot of balls in golf. And I know it's from my own efforts where I lose them all into the far reaches beyond the fairway. I figured, how could you pass up a deal of all of these fabulous golf balls from
Cool with them.
So and they got numbers, so you could probably have a miniature pool. So with our deep appreciation and wish for many more.
Thank you.
And only the right kind of strokes. And we wish you a happy birthday.
Thank you. I'm touched.
I'd ask unanimous consent. You're happy birthday. No.
Don't do anything to get the microphone.
Well, thank you, Mr. Shepro, not only for your consideration for Mr. Martin's birthday, but for the lack of concern of any expense. Moving on, is there anyone here for public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to the treasurer's report. Mr. Kilburn.
Good morning and thank you. My report is on file, but I have some additional comments and information for you and the board members. Our overall tax collection for the 2020 year completed. We collected 99.98% of the taxes, which is $1,387,616,621. Tax sale went off on November 1st. Remember, that was our second tax sale of the year because of COVID, which leads me to my third point, and that is we are booking almost $2.6 million this year, where we budgeted $1.5 million for revenue to the general fund due to the tax sales. Remember, that is because we had 2 tax sales. So obviously in 2020, the county was shorted because there was no tax sale. This year, we're booking almost $2.6 million, and finance has been notified. There was a short question about inflation last time. I did note that the Phillies Fed survey of professional forecasters showed a 5-year inflation forecast of 2.9%. and a 10-year outlook of 2.55%, which implies a 5 to 10-year outlook of 2.2% for inflation over that 5 to 10-year period. Obviously, right now, we're bumping up on 6, but over a 5 to 10-year, it's 2.2.
Any questions for Mr. Kilborn? Seeing none, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, and please have a happy and safe Thanksgiving holiday.
And the same to you. Our next report is from Mr. Onsick.
Good morning, everyone. Since the bulk of my time, I think, will be spent on reviewing the proposed amendments to the FY22 draft budget, I'll just try to run through my finance report very briefly. So there's a few pages that address the variances that are showing up this year compared to budget. Almost all of them are minor or can be explained as they relate to grant-funded funds, which, thank you, which if they're overages and expenditures, they'll be reimbursed by grant revenue. There's other variances that for special revenue funds for which there is fund balance, meaning there's savings carried over from previous years to fund those overages. And probably the one notable one is we do have each year would be in the coroner's office, and that's due to the difference between what was budgeted for autopsy expense and what we've actually incurred. And so we typically do one budget adjustment at the end of the year to address that. Regarding health insurance fund monitoring, as of November 18th, the report for revenue and expenses indicates that $634,000 more has been collected in refunds and contributions and has been expensed. That leaves a cash balance at $6.6 million. The Coronavirus Relief Fund, basically, I just wanted to just reassure you that the final quarterly report was submitted to the Office of Inspector General, and that is because the entire relief fund revenue was expended, other than the interest expense that is still remains that will be applied towards any remaining administrative expenses. I do have a brief accounting of the American Rescue Plan. This is just based on what's in the accounting system at this point. And so there's a balance of $41 million. Special Reserve Fund, the savings from COVID for payroll reimbursements, the $6.7 million. Most of that, or all of that at this point, has been utilized in the FY22 draft budget, although there will be amendments presented this morning that will change that. We still have $125,000 that was set aside by the JJC for their build out. That looks like will be carried into next year and drawn down at that point. And then there's that reserve for the biennial election of $320,000 that is in the reserve this year that will be drawn down next year. We still have $738,000 in the general fund contingency and $50,000 for adult prisoner room and board. Capital funds, 44% of building management's budget has been expended, 56% of information technology, and 78% for the multi-use facility. Shared and direct state tax revenue for the general fund. In total, this covers sales tax, local use tax, RTA sales tax, state income tax, and personal property replacement tax. Compared to budget, we're almost $8.7 million ahead of budget. And just to remind you, we budgeted very conservatively because we were unsure of how long the impact of COVID would have on the economy in the state of Illinois, but it's obviously recovered very well. And there's a significant increase in sales tax that's also due to our new cannabis tax revenue that we're collecting. The cost of service study, it has been completed. I received a preliminary report just yesterday. It was late yesterday, so I haven't had a chance to review it. But once I have, I will share those results with you. Let's see. The budget, we'll talk about that in a few moments. There are a variety of amendments to the draft budget that have been proposed, and I'll review each one with you so you can understand them and allow you to answer any questions. The status of the transition audits, everything has been completed except for the second audit. We had the first audit of the treasurer's office that took us from the time that Mr. Rickert left to the time that Mr. Kilborn arrived. Or I should say, it was at the point at which Mr. Rickert left. Now we need to do a second one at the point at which Mr. Kilborn arrived, and that is underway. And then we also had to add a new one, and that would be of the Human Resources Department as of the date that the director had left on May 14th. As soon as we have all of these completed, I'll send them to you. I'm waiting for them all to be completed, so we're not sending them to you piecemeal. And just to assure you, there have been no findings. Everything has been appropriately accounted for in each of those areas. The FY21 audit, the preliminary audit fieldwork for fiscal year 21 is tentatively scheduled for the week of January 17th. That normally lasts about a week, and that's the point at which the auditors do an assessment of the transactions that occurred during the year, and then they plan their audit accordingly. And the final audit fieldwork is tentatively scheduled to begin March 7th, and that takes about a month to complete. We are also in need of the auditor's assistance to implement accounting changes that are required by GASB 84. And this is regarding all of our agency funds. We will no longer be reporting them as accrued liabilities, but we need to recognize actual revenue and expenses, even though these are funds that do not belong to the county, but we are just custodians of. But there are new accounting rules for those funds that need to be implemented. It is more work than the finance department is able to handle and complete that in time by the deadline. So we are seeking Baker Tilly's assistance to help us with that. And there is a resolution included seeking funding for that. In the purchasing report, there are about 4 new bids and RFPs that were underway. One is for business analysis, plumbing services, fiber optic support services, and household waste collection. And then I'll just jump down to the total savings in October was almost $50,000, and year to date was just about $683,000. So that would conclude my own finance report. Do you have any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Ansick? Mr. Chairman, you're here now. Do you want to take over, or would you like me to continue?
Continue.
Okay, moving on then.
I got it.
One
Just-
question, Mr. Ford.
I hope this is an appropriate time to bring it up since it's part of this presentation. Just out of curiosity, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, since we have the different sites where you can get the vaccination now, we got Walgreens and some doctor's office. How long is our contract for our sites that we have now?
If I can speak, I believe Chris can share this with us as well, Chris Allen. But I believe we are ending our facility at the Mass Fac site at the end of this year. Is that correct? And then transitioning to another facility, in-house.
All right.
So, Madam Chair and committee members, as of yesterday, we are in negotiation with the property holders to extend to January 31st to support. The lease does end on the 15th of December, and we are working through those processes now.
All right, thanks.
And it's my understanding that we will not be paying rent, but we will simply be paying utilities.
Correct. The owner has graciously offered us the facility to support our community rent-free.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Surges.
Bill, just a comment, and I don't know if, you know what, this isn't for Chris, this is just in general. I'm not sure where this would go in the report, but we had mentioned earlier in the month and at the board meeting and at Human Services that every couple of years we get into this crunch with the insurance for the county. We believe that we have those numbers as of yesterday afternoon, which of course mean they did not make it into finance. We have those numbers. Jamie has put them together for anybody that would like to review them. But on an exception basis, we are leapfrogging finance and going direct to the board with that. And I just wanted to acknowledge that and offer any discussion that's needed. So yes, they were passed out.
Okay, but this is not
They
on
were
the
not
agenda.
public, they were
Okay.
not in time to
Got it.
publish. So
What we could do, Mr. Surges, is a little later on in the meeting, discuss this and have a consensus to move it forward to executive.
spectacular. Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns? If not, Mr. Onzik, you have a report for us on the 22 budget?
Yes, that's right. So I prepared a presentation to just help guide us through this. I had sent out that letter to everyone in which I tried to provide more detailed explanation, but do it as concisely as I could. It's just a little bit difficult to be trying to amend the budget at this point because now you have to spell out every single detailed line item that needs to be involved and changed at this point, rather than just using general terminology. And so I've tried to do both. I tried to provide the general description as well as the specific account numbers. So I'll just start by going through each one of the amendments that have been proposed. And most of these really have been suggested by board members, or there's just a couple that we noted were necessary, and I'll point those out as we go through. Okay, so these are amendments that would be added on to the ordinance adopting the fiscal year 2022 annual budget. So there's already a few amendments that have been approved and that are incorporated into the version that is already on the agenda for the special board meeting. So these amendments are in addition to the ones that are already included in that ordinance. The first one has to do with Mill Creek, and this is just simply due to the timing of things. Originally, we thought that it would not be, the timing would not work out to include the approval of the Mill Creek SSA tax levy at the November board meeting. And because it was not going to be included, we did not include the $200,000 increase in property tax revenue in the budget. Well, now that we're having a special board meeting and the Mill Creek SSA tax levy will be approved at the November 30th, or presumably would be approved at the November 30th special county board meeting, it would be appropriate then to also increase the property tax revenue for Mill Creek by that same 200,000. So that's the first amendment that I've proposed and recommended that you approve. The second one is that Sheriff Hayne has graciously volunteered to reduce the corrections budget by $1 million in order to assist the county in moving closer to a more structurally balanced budget that brings recurring expenditures more in line with recurring revenues. And so obviously that was an offer we couldn't refuse. So I am recommending that we accept that. And so that is what amendment number 2 addresses. Number 3 has to do with the county motor fuel tax. This might seem a little complicated because I don't know how aware of the details you are that were incorporated into the budget. So I would just like to first of all explain that when the draft or when the budget was prepared, it was proposed that 5% of the RTA sales tax revenue, which equates to roughly $1 million, be shifted from transportation to the general fund in order to support public safety. And that shift of RTA sales tax revenue was proposed with the understanding that the county board would authorize an increase in the county motor fuel tax rate of 2 cents per gallon, and that would go into effect July 1st. And the reason why July 1st is the date is because we basically have two choices. It's either January 1st or July 1st, according to the Illinois Department of Revenue. They have deadlines for submitting approved ordinances that authorizes any change in the motor fuel tax. And the deadline for January 1st was October 1st. So obviously we've missed that deadline. And the deadline for July 1st is April 1st. And so that is the deadline that we'd be targeting if the board so chooses to increase the motor fuel tax by 2%. So we did not include the increase in revenue of the county motor fuel tax in the FY22 budget because we assumed that there would be a budget adjustment later in the year, adding that revenue in when the board would approve that increase in tax. So at this point in time, within the FY22 draft budget, we are showing that change or that shift of $1 million out of transportation into the general fund, but there's no increase in the budget for the county motor fuel tax revenue. So depending on what the board's intentions are, if you are desiring not to increase the county motor fuel tax by 2% this year, 2 cents, I'm sorry, 2 cents this year, then you might want to consider reversing this shift of RTA sales tax dollars out of transportation in order to make them whole again. So that is what this amendment would do. It's an option for you. I'm not necessarily recommending it. It's just an option to consider in light of all the other options we'll be considering this morning. And maybe this will make more sense when I proceed a little bit further. We can come back to this if you have questions.
I'm sorry, Joe, is everybody clear what Joe just said?
Understand?
Actually, you know what? I think I confused myself.
I'd like to have some.
Yes, I was ahead. I was not reading my own slide. Okay, so this amendment is intended to, okay, if the county board intends to increase the motor fuel tax by 2 cents, then this amendment increases the county motor fuel tax revenue budget by the $1,812,000 that such an increase would create for the Division of Transportation. So by putting this into the budget, you've now kind of balanced it. Because we have the $1 million that was taken out of transportation, and we're putting back this 1.8 million, so they actually come out ahead. And the purpose of the amendment is just to provide evidence or of your commitment to increase it later in the year at the appropriate time. So that's what this amendment will do. The next amendment is the one I described, and that is if you choose not to increase the county motor fuel tax by 2 cents a gallon, you might want to consider then shifting back that $1 million of RTA sales tax revenue out of the general fund back to transportation in order to make them whole. But by so doing, now you have the problem of, okay, now how do we balance the budget? And we would have to balance it by using an additional $1,001,000 of reserves.
Mr. Hanzak,
Yes.
I'd like to have some discussion on this proposed amendment 3 and 4.
Who's speaking, please?
The chairman.
Yeah, I know, but thanks.
Good morning, Mavis.
Do we have,
Morning,
do we have some
everybody.
discussion? After Mr. Leonard?
This is Leonard speaking. You know, Joe, I guess in kind of basic or simple terms, which is the best way for me to understand it. Instead of transferring the RTA sales tax from transportation to the general fund, we're not going to do that. And we're going to take $1 million from the sheriff that he's offered to give to balance the budget. Is that correct?
No, it's not. I mean, you could look at it that way, but that's, I mean, in the end, we need to have another $1 million. So,
So we're going to need $1 million of ARP funds and $1 million from the sheriff, and no motor fuel tax increase and no transfer of the RTA sales tax from the transportation department to the general fund.
Or some other
Whether-
solution.
1,100,000 has to come out of some reserve or.
But what happens to additional funding for judicial public safety? Remember that money was going to be transferred and they were going to get that additional 5%, going from 25 to 30%?
With the sheriff's money?
But we still need to balance the budget. We're still $1 million out.
Well, I thought we were going to ask for an additional $1 million out of ARP and $1 million from the
Out of,
sheriff.
out of reserves,
Yeah.
out of reserves.
Mr. Chair, Bates, please.
Bates,
Before we go taking money out of the ARP again, I think we need to not assume that, but that's going to require some serious discussion and consensus building. We can't dip into the ARP every time it's not a piggy bank. Thank you.
thank you.
Chair,
Mr.
Chair, Chappie here. I think we should also consider and discuss the 1.4% increase possible in our tax levy, which would give us about $700,000, which would maybe $750,000, which would go a long way to filling that $1 million gap.
Thank you. That's amendment number 6 that we'll be discussing. Surges.
Mr. Berman, I get confused sometimes when we're using certain specific language, which I've challenged this committee for in the past. When we use the term reserve, that makes it sound to the open public that this is money that we've saved and built up over time. Where really what we're saying is we're going to take it from the ARPA funds, and ARPA funds and reserve that we've built up into, if you will, our piggy bank are two very different things to me. And I just want to make sure that that distinction is out there. And we do have other options. If we're $1 million short, we can
Right.
simply find $1 million of savings and not spend it. So
Well, there are other reserves also,
absolutely.
not ARP.
So currently, if I may, how much money, Mr. Onsick, are we taking out of the ARP funds? Without looking for the additional $1 million?
About 5 million.
For the budget.
well, if I proceed through this, I think we'll get to it rather than try to use my memory. I think
Very
will
good.
just get us into trouble. Okay. So maybe if I run through the rest of these amendments, and then we can always circle back, at least then you
Alright.
have the whole picture, and then it might be more clear. And so this amendment was simply to increase the county motor fuel tax to match the intention of raising the motor fuel tax rate. This next amendment was to put back the $1 million into KDOT, and then we would need the $1 million more to balance the budget. And I'm saying that it should come out of reserves, literally meaning reserves, not ARPA funds. So I was trying to be very careful in using that word in that context, although I guess it's not obvious. And then also, if we're going to take out that $1 million shift of RTA sales tax dollars, it'd be a second item you would need to do beside changing the budget, the draft budget, would be to not approve the resolution that amends the Kane County financial policies regarding the RTA sales tax allocation, because that is the authoritative source of how those RTA sales tax funds are actually allocated. And that's where the percentage would be changed. So there's two places, one in the financial policies and one in the budget itself. And that's why it's mentioned here. Okay, this is, now we're getting into the ARPA fund. Another option to consider, another amendment to consider is that since we are allowed to use the ARPA funds to reimburse the county for lost revenue that's calculated using an assumed annual revenue growth rate of up to 4.1%, we could do that. It's allowable by the federal government. The general fund share of lost revenue under that calculation of 4.1% annual growth rate would be $6.9 million. And KDOT share for their funds 300 through 305, those are the fund numbers, would be a total of $3.2 million. So if you were to use the ARPA funds, that would increase, or that would replace the use of reserves into the general fund of $6.9 million. And this will become more clear on one of my final slides. And this also might solve the problem then, where you could actually leave the shift of RTA sales tax dollars in place of that extra $1 million that's being moved into the general fund. You can leave that in place without increasing the motor fuel tax revenue, but approving the use of these ARPA funds. And then these ARPA funds would more than make KDOT whole, at least temporarily, for 2022.
Joe,
Okay.
question?
Yes.
So on that last slide,
Yes.
when you said "and," that means in addition to, so a total of 10 million, the 6.9 plus the 3.2?
Well, that's just the share for general fund and KDOT. There's a total amount, and that'll, let me see what that amount is. The total amount of lost revenue using the 4.1 million, 4.1% annual growth rate would be $16,171,000.
Yes,
So-
yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm
We
sorry.
went up that high.
For 1 year?
I
For
didn't-
1 year?
For
Was
1 year,
that-
that's the estimated lost
22?
revenue for FY22. Yes.
All right. Excuse me, we have a gentleman has his hand up. This is not open for discussion other than to the board. So you would have to,
The benefit of the audience.
No.
Just want to know
No.
what the acronym ARPA means.
oh,
American-
That is the American Rescue Plan Act.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Very good.
Okay.
All right, continue.
So that's a summary of the lost revenue recoupment option. Okay, then I just wanted to present kind of a summary of where we're at. I kind of used what I presented to the board a few months back. So in 2020, we've already used $7.4 million of ARPA funds for lost revenue recoupment. That's already been taken out of the fund. We don't know yet what FY21 actually will be. I mean, we'll know that for sure in February. So I'm still using the original estimate. I don't think it's going to be the 16.6 million, especially now that we seem to be collecting more revenue from the state of Illinois than was anticipated. So that will likely be lower than that, but I'm still using that original estimate. FY22 is based on the actual budgeted revenue. And so I think that's a fairly solid number. I mean, at least in terms of the budget, how it actually pans out in FY22 may be different. And this is just a budgeted figure in order to balance the budget. But what we would actually take out of the ARPA fund would only be based on the actual revenue, not a budgeted amount. So it may be significantly less, or it could be more if it is actually calculated to be more and the board approves more. But this is just what we're proposing as a budgeted figure of that 16,171,000. And then the year 2023 is what's projected out. And it's very difficult to know at this point. That's just a budgeted figure, an estimated figure. And then also in addition to that, we have what we estimated for the public safety personnel and public health personnel expense reimbursements that we're allowed to take out of ARPA. So I've incorporated that into the chart as well. And that, if we were to do all of this, that would use up like $83 million of the ARPA fund. And that's not counting what we've already reimbursed the county for COVID expenses, what we've reimbursed for the mass vaccination fund. So there's already other uses, as well as administrative expense that will be coming out of this. But I just wanted to provide this just to put it into perspective. Okay, then amendment number 6 is you could consider increasing the property tax by the allowable 1.4% CPI or change in CPI. That would generate an additional $789,000 for fiscal year 22. If you do decide to do that, that would, depending on whether or not you choose to use ARPA for lost revenue recoupment, by increasing the property tax revenue, that would reduce the amount of property tax freeze protection fund that we would need to use. Or if you use ARP lost revenue recoupment, it would reduce the amount of lost revenue recoupment. So either way, it's a reduction in one of those sources of funding, and it's a permanent increase in revenue. I just put this slide together. I was asked, what would be the impact, and what this is like. If we were to not increase the property tax revenue this year, we're not only losing that property tax revenue of $789,000 this year, that also carries forward into next year, where we lose that next year as well. And on top of that, we also lose the $11,000 of CPI increase that we would have had on that additional revenue had we approved of it. So in total, we're really losing, if you look ahead into 2023, if we do not increase it this year, we'll have lost $800,000 of revenue next year as well, assuming that the CPI increase is 1.4%. If it's 5% or whatever other percentage, it would be that much more. So this is just to put it into perspective that we're not only talking about foregoing this year's property tax revenue increase, but it's compounded as each year you go forward with the CPI increase on top of that. And then the last amendment that was suggested by Dr. Iqbal is that the county's portion of health and dental expense for county board members be cut in half, which really would necessitate increasing the county board members' contribution by the same amount, which would, of course, yield a savings to the county of almost $110,000, but only because it's that much more that the county board members would be contributing. Although this is an amendment for the budget, I believe the personnel policies may also need to be amended. And given the fact that we've already completed open enrollment, we may have issues with trying to change it at this point too. So those things have not yet been explored or dealt with. I'm only just letting you know those may be issues that in the end may prevent us from doing this. But I wanted to honor Dr. Iqbal's request by including this as an amendment. Okay, so if you remember back, I presented in that middle column like an original plan for closing the gap. We started with that $15 million. We needed to add to it a contingency for the collective bargaining agreement increases that we're expecting at a minimum of a 2% increase. And so I wanted to incorporate that into the budget. So that's been added in. And then there's been some expenditure reductions. We had the savings by refinancing the bonds. We eliminated 2/3 of the new positions that were requested, and we postponed compensation adjustments that were over the normal 2%. But in addition to that, we now have Sheriff Haynes volunteering to reduce his corrections budget by $1 million. And then in order to make everything come out in the end in the round numbers, I'm also proposing that we just reduce the postage budget by about $13,000. And that's really to address rounding issues. So that's that change column where, and that's included in the amendments that you have just seen. Okay, now if we were to use the ARPA funds for the lost revenue recoupment, that would then contribute to closing the gap by that $6.9 million. By doing that, we would be able to reduce the property tax freeze protection fund use by $400,000, meaning we would only need to use $1.6 million to balance the budget, and we'd only need to use $1 million of the COVID payroll reimbursement savings to contribute to the capital fund, which is an annual contribution out of the general fund we make every year, but it would be funded this time by COVID payroll reimbursement savings. And that's an appropriate use of COVID payroll reimbursement savings because those payroll reimbursement savings were a one-time savings, and we're applying it to the capital fund for a one-time capital project. So that's appropriate. And that $1.6 million of property tax freeze protection fund, that's roughly the average that we've been using each year all along since we created that fund. And so that is in line and consistent with what we've done in the past. And then aside from those two uses of reserves, which I would call those two items reserves, all the other uses of the reserves will be eliminated by the fact that you'd be drawing down from ARPA in order to replace the lost revenue. So the total use of reserves would go from $10.5 million to $2.6 million if you approve those amendments. And I think that's my last slide. So we can go back and talk about anything you'd like, but I wanted to get through at least the overview of what is presented or what the options are.
Yes, sir. Or yes.
Joe Shepro, the property tax freeze protection fund is not a statutory fund, right? It's just simply something that the county has created to hold revenue and make it sound like something.
Yes, it was. I mean, the official purpose, I think, might have been codified in a resolution, was to create a fund that the county would draw upon before it, or in order to postpone a property tax increase, it would first draw down those funds before it did that.
And how, if at all, does that differ from contingency?
It really doesn't in a practical.
It's just a different label.
It's just a different label, right?
Any other?
Yes.
Yes, Leonard.
Yes, this is Leonard. Mr. Onsick, in going over your last two slides, which I think really capsulizes exactly what we're talking about, because of the changes and the amendments that we are considering and some that we will approve, we're looking at taking roughly $7 million from ARPA to balance the budget and only $2.6 million from other reserves.
That's correct.
Balance budget.
In this scenario, yes.
And we are not moving or transferring the RT sales tax bottom line, and we're not increasing the motor fuel tax. Is that correct?
That's correct. We'd be leaving that shift as originally budgeted of that 5% out of transportation into the general fund. But in return, for fiscal year 22, the transportation would be receiving that whatever million dollars of ARPA funds for lost revenue, which would more than make up for that loss of RTA sales tax.
And then we are also actually reducing the amount we're taking out of the property tax freeze protection fund by $400,000. So instead of taking 2 million, we're taking $1.6 million.
Yes, that's correct. And if you still would decide to increase the property tax revenue, which is not included in this scenario, what you would end up doing is reducing mostly the ARP lost revenue recoupment. So we would need less lost revenue recoupment out of the ARPA funds if you were to increase the property tax revenue levy. And that's a good thing in the sense that you're replacing a one-time use of ARPA funds with a permanent, recurring source of revenue. So that's the advantage of increasing the property tax revenue, but not increasing it. Then we have this option of using ARPA instead. So it's your decision.
Thank you.
Done.
Yeah.
Sorry. Chairman Berman and Mr. Onsick, I have been vocal with the notion that we have not done a deep dive into this budget from a line item perspective. And nor do I think we need to at this point, because as you mentioned earlier in your report, we have a couple of RFPs out there. One of them is for the business analysis report. And until that data is in, it would be difficult for me to begin analyzing which department should more for, how we're spending our monies or what's needed where. And for that fact alone, I am not in favor of the 2 cent, tax for the motor fuel tax. I'm not interested in increasing the property tax adjustment at this time. As that report comes in, I believe we will have the data that we need to have the knowledge we need to make some choices in this. And I am very supportive of using the ARPA funds. And again, I kind of look at, and maybe I look at this uniquely, but I don't look at the ARPA funds as 103 million that's windfall that's come in. We had 65% of the original 97 million that came in with the first batch of COVID funds. So our portion of this is $150,000. We've played by the rules. We have a one-time adjustment. Again, I've challenged anybody, and Joe, you are just, you operate at a level so far above me that I can't understand what you do sometimes. But and I'm honest about that. But in this particular instance, we don't know how we've been impacted by this COVID. And so if we're going to use this as a one-time shot to make an adjustment while we're doing our homework and gathering the data, I'm okay with that and this solution personally.
If I may respond to that, or I'm sorry, I don't want.
Chairman?
Thank you. I'd like to just clarify, if we take a look at the ARP funds, and not just for this year, but the proposal, as we saw the drawdown for other fiscal years, we will still, I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, we're still in a gap. We're using money that came through to fund future expenses, pay increases, other increases that the county is going to accrue, capital improvements, from money that is in a separate account. When that account is all drawn down, how we're going to make up that gap? Because it's temporary funding. And that's something that I hope that this board will address, not just to think about what's going to be happening with this particular budget for 22, but I hope you're all going to start addressing where you're going to be going in the future, next year, the year after. And I appreciate what you're saying with the compensation study, the business study, that's critically important. But there's enough anecdotal data right now that we are aware that Kane County is not keeping up with other counties' level of compensation. I think we can all agreed to that from what all of our departments have said.
Hmm.
So what we're going to have after that study is done is an analytical study, proof, documented proof of where we are with the gap. But we can all recognize that there is a gap. So whether or not it's going to be a property tax increase, which is going to net $780,000 for next year, compounded for the following year, which may bring that, I hope, over $1 million of additional revenue that would happen for the 23 budget. Or if you decide to do the transportation tax, the motor fuel tax, which will bring in $1.8 million for the second half of next year, which if you drive, the study's been done, 22,000 miles a year, and you buy only all of your gas here in Kane County, it'll be $7 increase that the average consumer will have to pay. So I just think that there should be thoughtful conversation. If you're going to be plugging it this year, what are you going to be doing for next year? Because whatever decisions you make for this year's budget, 22 budget, is going to impact your decisions that you're going to be making in 23. Because you're still going to have a gap. It's only going to be larger because of additional expenses.
Mr.
Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Chair, I understand your logic. The problem is our increases are much greater than a property tax increase every year. So even if we would incorporate a property tax increase this year, which is compounded, I understand the logic of that. However, I am against it for the simple reason that our budget gap will not be decreasing, it will be increasing even with that. So what we have to do is find an alternative that will take care of that gap totally or in great part, and then look somewhere down the road, maybe at a potential property tax increase or a motor fuel tax increase. But I think the perception of taxpayers, and I think most of us are property taxpayers here in Kane County, is they don't totally understand the COVID money and the ARPA money that we've received. They see a figure of $200 million, and they're saying now they want us to increase our taxes to the county too. And I can't support that right now. I think there are other alternatives that we have that we've talked about that will take care of that gap for a long period of time, maybe 7 or 8 years. And, you know, somewhere down the road, sure, I understand we may have to increase property taxes to our residents. However, this amount of money, even compounding it, will not keep up with the gap that we're creating each and every year just with payroll and benefits. That's about $2.5 million a year. So, you know, we have to look at that and we have to find a solution. I think we do have a solution that might be put into the taxpayers' hands where they can decide whether or not they want to approve a tax increase or not. And that would be my preference. So I am against the motor fuel tax. I'm against a property tax increase. And I think we have another option that we can give to the taxpayers, which will give them the option of deciding what they want to do.
Deputy.
Mr. Chair, Tepe here. Some time ago, I had talked about the fact that for 10 years, this board has not passed the cost of living increase, and as a consequence has created a tremendous budget gap. And the 1.4% increase in the allowable cost of living increase will cost the typical taxpayer here $5 a year, not $5 a month, $5 a year. Now, I've got close to 2,000 people on my email list, and I sent an email out to all of them, and I got about 20 replies back, 2 of whom were against any tax increase and would probably say that about any tax increase. The other 18 said, I can readily afford the $5 a year, and I understand that the county needs more money. We need to be fiscally responsive. And if we do as Mr. Leonard suggests, the probability, where we would be putting the probability on the taxpayer to decide whether or not there's going to be a substantial increase in their taxes, because the county could have done the cost of living increase and have narrowed that gap. And the cost of living increase, as Mr. Onsick had said, will give us about $750,000 a year. That's money that the county needs just to keep up with payroll and inflation increases.
Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Tepe, I agree with your logic. And I think part of your argument kind of feeds into my logic. You're saying that the taxpayers, if they are informed properly of what the additional cost would be to them, some are going to be in favor of it. I don't doubt that at all. But I think if we come up with a different type of sales tax increase that is not only for the property tax people that pay property taxes in King County, but for all people who buy things in King County, and they realize that it's only going to cost them something comparable to what you're talking about, maybe $5 to $15 a year. I'm saying, let's let them decide what they want to do. Let's not tell them we've received 200 million in the last 2 years and we want more taxes. I think they have a right to make a decision. And if they are informed and they want to do it, I think it's great. If they don't, then we are going to have to look at other options down the road. But I don't agree with the sales tax, property tax, or the motor fuel tax. So that's my position on it.
Deputy?
My rebuttal to Mr. Leonard is, we were elected to do that. We were elected to understand the budget. We were elected to have the fiscal responsibility. And it's our responsibility to look and give this kind of advice to our constituents. And that's why I say it's our responsibility to do that, not throw it back on the taxpayer, who would have a tremendous problem in understanding this budget, because I have a worse problem in understanding it.
Shepro, maybe this is my response to both of you. I'm not sure. I've still got some things I'm not sure I completely understand. I think I understand that this proposed budget, there are no cuts anywhere. That this budget has reduced the asks for increases in many cases, but it doesn't actually cut anything. And I guess what I hear from people is, and I'm not saying it's all logical, it's saying you want us to pay more taxes, but you can't find a single thing in your budget to cut. And we read in the paper that you've got hundreds of millions of dollars that's come in that is supposed to cover revenue losses from the pandemic. So why are you coming, whether it's $5 a year or $50 a year, why are you coming back to me before you've even taken an axe to the budget? And I guess a follow-up question is that, as I understand it, and I think we went through this when I was the board attorney, it is a cumbersome process to cut a budget once it's adopted. You gotta almost start over again. And if the theory is, now that we have this study, at a later time, we would be visiting what to do about what that study shows. If that would indicate cuts, that becomes a difficult, lengthy process. I think it might even in some cases require a supermajority for some of those actions. I'm not sure. So I guess also, I'm not totally sure at this point what's in and what's out of the proposed budget. I mean, as I understand it, the gas tax is not now in the proposed budget.
Correct.
Would have to be added back in. The levy is not in the proposed budget.
Correct.
I mean, that is the cost of living and would have to be added back in. There are internal movements like the money from the sheriff And I think the property tax fund, there was money taken out of that. But I think that's in a way, isn't that sort of rearranging the deck chairs? I mean, it's not new money. It's just taking money out of one place and putting it somewhere else to do something. So I guess, what do I make of all that? I guess, the comment that was made, I think earlier, we haven't really drilled down on this budget the way I think our constituents expect us to. And just to say, well, we just need an extra $5 or $10. The Boston Tea Party took place because the government in Great Britain decided they wanted an extra 2 pennies for a tax on tea. And people said, it's not that much. It's, 5 cups a year. And the people said, enough. And I just am concerned that without some steps here that we take seriously, maybe the answer is there's not a single thing in this budget that could be reduced. But I kind of doubt that. On the other hand, I do know that the departments have tried to be lean. I myself have spoken up about the disparities in pay. But to Mr. Leonard's point, even the gas tax and the levy combined is not going to begin to address the problems with the pay disparity. So it seems to me there needs to be a real plan and not not putting a Band-Aid on an arterial wound.
Madam Chair.
I would just, excuse me, Mr. Martin, for just jumping in. If I can refresh your memory, Mr. Shepro, in 2017, the board asked for a mandated services study. That was all mandated services that were required by the state of Illinois. That study clearly showed and indicated 5 years ago that Kane County had been cut to the bones with its budget. There was an in-depth analysis that I believe cost well over how much was
It was just over 100,000.
$100,000 for that study. I have asked that we update that study for next year. So we take a look at what the additional mandates are that have come through the state of Illinois to make sure that we are in complete compliance with funding, especially when it comes to judicial public safety laws that have changed. So we know that those are additional expenses that the county is going to have to be taking a look at, which Ms. Mosser, State's Attorney Mosser, has already brought forward to you some of those additional requirements. As far as budget cuts, I disagree with you on that. I reached out to Sheriff Hain and started talking to him about potential budget cuts. He came forward at a special meeting that was held last week, and he cut his budget by $1 million. So there was a contribution as a budget cut. So that was recognized in the presentation. So we can talk about political sayings that, oh, we have to cut the budget, we have to do a deeper dive. Most of our costs are with our people who work for the county. We have people working for the county, sir, who are making $12 an hour. Out of that $12 an hour, not only do they have to pay their taxes, they also have to pay 17% towards their insurance, which brings them down to maybe $8 take home an hour. That is a very low wage for the work that they do. So I think the county has been incredibly prudent, very prudent with its money and how it's been spent. And the services that are being provided to our taxpayers are the best this team of 1,200 people can possibly put forward. We've seen that there has been deferred maintenance in some of our buildings, which is going to come back to additional expenses have to be paid because we have to have a safe workplace for all of our members, for all of our residents. That has to happen. Should we not repair an elevator? Should we not repair air conditioning at the sheriff's jail? At what point do we say enough is enough and you can't cut anymore? Because if you continue to cut, you'll cut off an arm. And then what happens? So yes, I agree with you. I agree with all of you that there are significant issues facing this budget. If we're going to be doing a sales tax, whether it's on general merchandise or if it's on gas, if we're going to do a property tax levy, which 23 of you agreed to with the Forest Preserve District, but yet you argue about doing it here. You have to think long-term. What do you want to do? And please step away from politics. Step away, please, for the services that have to
I
be
want to raise a
provided here for
point
the
of
county.
personal privilege. Every discussion that we don't agree with you, you always come back and say it's politics. Isn't it possible that we can have reasonable differences
Without
without
question.
suggesting it's political?
Well, without question, but some decisions are political because of vantage point and views. And I think you have to be honest and suggest that. And we're just talking about money right now. We're just talking about money.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Martin, I think is next.
Mr. Martin, I'm sorry.
At the risk of turning into a ramble here, I've kept some notes as we've talked about things. There is no question that we have gone 8 years without a general levy increase. And part of where we sit today in our financial difficulties is because maybe we could have looked at that. Maybe we could have done it differently. But there's an assumption buried away, and that is that had the taxes been raised, that money, that additional money would have been prudently spent, and we wouldn't end up yet today with a conversation. And I'm not trying to point to Kane County as being different than anybody else, but more money isn't necessarily always judiciously spent. That point having been made, we do need to look at our revenue. We have significant issues. But when you look at what we're going to do, and the concept of drilling down on the budget, that I think if a carpenter sets a nail, sometimes you can set it too far, and I don't want to have the risk of doing that. Having had a flat levy for 8 years, I think I don't want to be on the committee, on the ad hoc committee that's going to drill down on the budget and find the miraculous savings that we're going to dig up. The chairman's point is well taken. A huge percentage of what we spend around here is because someone being basically the state of Illinois hands us the responsibility to spend this. We can't opt out and say we don't want to have a probation department, that we don't want to have a jail, that we don't want to have a sheriff's office. These are handed to us. And so I don't think we're gonna have a eureka moment where we look at the budget and say, oh my goodness, here's the salvation. My concern about raising taxes at this point in time, and I think Mr. Shepro mentioned, offered an analogy of putting a Band-Aid on a aortal. I'm not good on my body parts, and aortal hemorrhage. We do need to look at it, but I think Mr. Leonard made the point that what we can do on a voluntary basis around here pays lip service to the issue, but doesn't really address it in the realistic way that we're going to have to look at it. When you look at the relative short term about the availability of funds in the rescue plan, be a taxpayer now, okay? I mean, just a taxpayer. Don't sit at these committee meetings in your mind's eye. Just sit there, and at the next meeting that occurs after this morning, we are likely to approve the method by which we are distributing $4 million to social agencies within the county. All valid, all necessary, all to the services provided. But we're going to take of those funds and distribute $4 million. How then do we tell the taxpayers that we want them to come up with a little extra money because we don't want to take it out of the fund to their indirect benefit? Okay, to me, it's a difficult sell when we have the capacity and the entitlement to utilize those funds to in fact not utilize them. And when we distribute over 4 times what we could collect in additional taxes next year to social service agencies, I think constituents are probably going to look at it and say, somebody should have thought through this a little bit. I agree. We need to address these issues. We need to sit down and have hard conversations that reflect reality. And that is that, in my mind at least, we're not gonna cut millions of dollars off of the budget. We need to figure out what our long-term financial resources are going to be. We do need to address the issue that our employees are not, it's generous to call it anecdotal. We all know that everybody here is having trouble hiring people, getting applications. We need to address those issues, but it needs to be addressed, I think, with more potency than these little pinpricks of tax increases can accomplish for it. So I am not in favor of either the motor fuel tax or the tax increase this year. I am in favor of buckling down and figuring out what in fact we're going to do in the long term and how we in fact properly educate the residents of this county to appreciate what we have done, which is quite substantial. Chairman commented on the services that are provided and at the cost that we that our taxpayers incur. We're doing a heck of a job here, and I think that education needs to be put together. We need to have a plan together. We've got a couple of studies that are out that we haven't heard from yet. I think we need to get through the budget year, as we have talked about, without the new taxes, and move towards putting together a long-term plan.
Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Bill Leonard. I would like to make a suggestion. Pages 13 and 14 of Mr. Onsik's report, I think, truly summarizes and encapsulates what we need to do for the 22 budget. I'm in favor of it. I will vote to take this action, but I think what we need to do, maybe even starting in December, if not December, definitely January, is take a long look at what we need to do to solve this very large problem we have. Doing it in 6 weeks when we're trying to balance a budget is hasty, and I think in some respects irresponsible. Mr. Tepe has ideas. Madam Chair has ideas. I think we all have ideas. And I think what we need to do is have enough time and not be being put under pressure to get a budget approved in 6 weeks. We need to start working on this, not just for 23 in January, but for the next 5 to 10 years.
Absolutely.
And I think we need, unfortunately, I hate to say it, but another committee formed that will do this and meet monthly and find a solution, or at least options for everybody to consider. But at this point, I think Mr. Onsik's come up with a way of balancing our budget for 22. He actually has reduced the amount of reserves we're taking, not our money, but reserves. And I think it's a reasonable plan. Is it perfect? No. Does it work? Yes. And I think what we have to do is start working on 23 as soon as we pass this budget.
I agree.
Yeah, I would
Mr.
agree.
Chair,
Madam
Gums.
Chair,
Let who's gonna speak.
who's speaking?
Gums.
Oh,
Hi, thank you. I am not on this committee, but I just want to say a few words. And I want to first thank everybody for having this conversation. There's a couple of things that go through my mind when we have this difficult conversation. One, it was brought up that, this isn't a political issue. However, it really is a political issue because we're all affected by talking about taxes. Every single one of us that sits here has to deal with that repercussion. And we talked about messaging to folks in our communities. So I have taken the time and I have gone out and spoke to my constituents. In my district, we're not rich. We don't have a lot of money here. But my first statement to them is, listen, I'm going to throw something by you. I want to raise your taxes. And of course, I get the scowl. And then I explain, here in Kane County, I pay $194 to Kane County in tax. We have not raised your taxes. Kane County has not raised your taxes in 10, 11 years. And when I break it down for them and I explain to them the services that will be provided by this difficult but necessary, in my opinion, obligation to have the conversation and fix these long-term problems, every single one of the people that I spoke to said they understood and agreed. We don't want to put a Band-Aid on an artery issue, but we can't not do anything at all. And I think that's what's been happening. And this conversation is the work that we're supposed to be doing. We can have more committees, we can have longer conversations, but it doesn't get us to the end result. Also, the feedback that I've gotten from folks is, why do you keep borrowing money from ARPA or the CARES Act or the general fund? Why do you keep doing that and not doing the other by raising our property taxes or raising our gas tax? We're literally talking about, $20. And yeah, that's not a big deal to some. It's a big deal to others. And those others understand it when we message it properly. And by messaging it properly, we simply tell them the truth. And I'm grateful that we're all having this discussion. I hope it continues and we don't kick the can down the road anymore. So I would be in support of all of those things, but I'm extremely grateful for this conversation because it has got to happen. So thank you.
Ms. Sturgis.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to respond to one of the comments from Corinne, because I struggled with it this past couple of weeks. When Corinne, you mentioned Madam Chair, you mentioned the willingness of this collective on behalf of the Forest Preserve District to not hesitate to do an increase there. And when I went home that night, my wife challenged me. I said, I'm able to draw a differential because the referendums that went out to the Forest Preserve District went out in earnest and said, do you want to give us extra money to purchase all these additional lands? And not once, but twice, in spades, buckets full of money to go do this. It was overwhelming, the support by the residents and our constituents.
Absolutely.
And as Vern had mentioned, as our job as caretakers of that money, we realize that along with all these purchases, we can't sustain the services to the lands we purchased without an increase there. And so it was easy for me on that day to say, I'm in favor of this because this is what the people asked us to do. And Bill, if we go to referendum and the people say, we agree, we've never had a problem with the county, everything we've ever asked you guys to do, you've done in spades, everything's working wonderfully, and we say, here's the reports that have come in, we can't continue it. We're gonna have to cut something unless you kick in a little more. And they say yes, then by golly, let's go do it. But I think we at least owe them that, like we did at the Forest Preserve District, which made it kind of a slam dunk sort of analysis. And I didn't want that comment to go unaddressed because I struggled, and I struggled for days going, this is coming at me, I can't avoid it, I need to do what's right. But everybody I talked to said, no, we voted for that referendum. We wanted as much open space, lands, forest preserve as we could possibly get. But you didn't give us the money to have the staff there to take care of those lands. We get it. Good job, move on. And I just wanted to make sure I commented on that, so.
Thank you, Mr. Sturgis. My comments, we've got 8 new members on this board that have been on the board less than a year. We started in September working on our budget. And, that's not a very long time for, especially with some inexperienced people as to what goes on in the county. So I think we've done a fantastic job. This discussion, I think, is just the best thing we've had. We've come up with a way to balance the budget. I think that's fantastic. But this discussion really shows that we need to really work on the future. And we can't put it off until September of 2022. We've got to start working on it as soon as possible. So I think we all have, as Mr. Leonard said, we all have ideas. We all have desires, but I think we've got a fantastic county. All our departments, I think, are all interested in doing the best for the people of King County. And I'm sure that's what we want to do also. But we need to work, get started on solving the real problem. Mr. Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really believe that there's a lot of valid points that have been brung here today. But as we go into the future, I think we should start right away on trying to figure out how to get past this point with the budget. And I see the small things that people are talking about, but it still leaves a big gap. I agree that if we dug into the budget real deep, we're not going to find a whole lot. And I definitely agree about the pay, where pay need to be increased for our employees. But as we do this, I'm hoping that we also think outside the box some and see how technology can help us with either bringing in revenue or decreasing our expenditure. We got the fiber out there. We need to find a way to take the fiber and allow it to bring revenue into the county. The whole talk about broadband is coming out. We need to take a look at broadband and see what it does and understand what Madam Chair is doing with overall economic development. And I think that's really important because spending some time in DuPage County, which has been the first part of my career, I've seen how tourism and an economic increase of population during peak times really increase a chance to get more dollars into a county or into a city or whatever. So I'm hoping that we think outside the box along with this. There's one more thing I'd like to bring up, and it's a long-term thing, is what it takes to constantly maintain these buildings that we're in. In my point of view, we really need to look at this area and what it costs the county, and is there a better solution? We're along the Riverwalk, we're along the river, we're in a great town, we're in a great county. What would happen tax-wise if this area was turned over into a developer? I think that's something we got to think about down the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Bates, please.
Ms. Bates.
Being one of those 8 brand new members of the board and one of the 8 who have never gone through this budget process before, I'm just now starting to understand how difficult this is. And thank you very much for this conversation today. It's helping me understand the budget better and helping me understand how hard it is. I'm gonna harp one more time about that the ARP money needs to be protected. And in the past, I've worried about saving enough money for external requests from our community and our nonprofits. But the way things are going, I'm starting to worry about our internal requests from our departments. We are going to, we're gonna spend this ARP money so fast that there will be nothing accomplished with it except plugging holes in the dam. I do agree it's our responsibility to find long-term solutions. And I agree that we need maybe a special task force for this. That's such a fancy word, a committee, who knows? But I don't want to be doing this next November. So thank you for all your hard work. And please, let's find some long-term solutions. Maybe the levy, raising the levy is the right solution. Maybe a sales tax. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bates. Any other comments? Moving on to our meeting then, item 6. Joe, you've completed your presentation. Thank you. Item 6, auditor's report, Ms. Wegman.
This will be quick. Our report is on file. I do want to remind everybody that we do have an auditor's hotline, and anything reported can be confidential and anonymous.
Any questions of our auditor? Thank you very much. Going on with item 7, new business. A resolution authorizing administrative assistant, a temporary hire for the American Rescue Plan Committee, continued term and a budget adjustment. Jared, are you speak to that?
Yeah, sure. Jared Sanchez here. This is just a renewal of the contract that we have with the committee's administrative assistant.
I don't think your mic is working.
Is it not working? Is it one of those you have to really get on top? Can you hear me better now? Yeah, there we go. Jared Sanchez here. This is a renewal of the contract for the administrative assistant for the American Rescue Plan Committee. It's set for 90 days, and I can take any other questions anyone has about this.
Deputy moves.
Sanchez seconds.
Deputy moves, Sanchez second. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Ford. Leonard.
Leonard, yes.
Martin.
Martin, yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Sturgis. Tepe.
Yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. Item B, resolution amending fiscal year 2021 building management budget. Chris, or who's? Any discussion on this? Or what?
Should we move?
Yeah, we need a motion, need a motion. Martin?
Leonard seconds.
Martin moves, Leonard second. Discussion? Chris is,
Oh, would you like a brief explanation or are there questions?
I don't think, I don't, no questions, so. Thank
The
you.
boiler work.
Call for the roll. Roll call, please.
Ford.
Yes.
Leonard.
Leonard, yes.
Martin.
Martin, yes.
Sanchez.
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis. Tepe.
Yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
Item C, a resolution authorizing fiscal year 21 budget adjustment for the AJC emergency purchase. Need a
Leonard
motion?
moves.
Leonard moves.
Ford second.
Ford second. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Ford.
Yes.
Leonard.
Leonard, yes.
Martin.
Martin, yes.
Sanchez.
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis.
Burgess, yes.
Tepe.
Tepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
Item D, resolution authorizing the GASB 84 implementation of services and related budget adjustment. Motion?
Leonard moves.
Hunter moves. Martin second. Discussion. Roll call, please.
Excuse me. What?
I'm sorry, Ford.
Yeah, can we get can I get just a little detail on this?
Yes, GASB, the Government Accounting Standards Board, has required that we change how we account for our agency funds. And so the revenue, the dollars coming into the funds and the dollars going out of the funds need to be recorded in detail as revenue and expenses. Previously, all these years, because it is not the county's funds, we were not required to record those transactions at that detail level, but now we are. So that involves going through all of our agency funds and doing the appropriate conversions. And then we also have to convert all of the transactions that have already taken place during fiscal year 21 in order to come up with the ending balance for the year in the appropriate format and change our reporting. So it's just a lot of behind the scenes accounting work that we don't have the capacity to take on in the finance department and to complete this in time for closing the year. So our auditors are able to assist us with that, and this is the cost of those additional services.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It's another government mandate. Several.
Joe, this is what you alluded to during a portion of your initial report, right? The change.
Yes, it is.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Ford.
Yes.
Leonard.
Leonard, yes.
Martin.
Martin, yes.
Sanchez.
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis.
Yes.
Tepe,
Pepe, yes.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
passes.
Item E, a resolution approving the purchase of a bomb suit for the Kane County Sheriff's Office bomb unit.
Pepe moves.
Surges
Leonard second.
Ford and Leonard. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis,
Yes.
Tepe,
Pepe, yes.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
passes.
Item F, a resolution authorizing expenditure for an emergency purchase affidavit for repair of the Kane County backflow preventers.
Ford moves.
Moved by Ford. Second by
Surges.
Sturgis. Discussion, Chris?
I'm here to answer any questions. I can do it in one sentence if you wish.
No questions. Thank you.
Anyway.
Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis,
Surges, yes.
Tepe,
Pepe, yes.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
passes.
Item G, a resolution authorizing expenditure for an emergency purchase affidavit for a government center building a boiler repair.
Martin moves.
Hart moves,
Pepe, second.
Leonard seconds. Discussion? Yes, Sturgis, or excuse me.
Sanchez.
Sanchez.
My question is, how regular are we doing, I guess, preventative maintenance on this? Is it normal for it to come up like imminent failure or we have to jump on it right away?
Yes, we're doing regular preventative maintenance, but what we're dealing with in this particular circumstance is a very dated system. And you just can expect failure down the road.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis,
Surges, yes.
Tepe,
Pepe, yes.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
passes.
If I can just make a quick
Yes, Jen.
comment,
Madam Chair.
just old Betsy, thank you, Chris, for keeping old Betsy working.
She's got a twin down there too. 2 boilers in this building.
All right.
Make do with one.
Item H, resolution authorizing the contract for Kane County 3rd Street Courthouse electrical upgrades project.
Martin moves.
Martin moves,
Sanchez seconds.
Sanchez second. Discussion? Ford?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we continue with this list and these lists keep coming back, I rest my case about the facilities that we have.
Here, here.
I agree with Mr. Ford.
The old courthouse.
It's still an old building that we keep.
God bless the old building.
Things age, you know, it's like my tooth fell out, okay?
Yeah.
We have problems, okay.
That's why you gotta retire things.
The trouble is you don't have Medicare for buildings.
That's
Nor for chief.
Right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Dave?
At this point in time, I have to get a plug in for how beautiful our buildings are, the character that they have.
Oh, my
And
God.
we had some old furnaces that never needed new filters, never needed maintenance. We got brand new $30,000 furnaces. Now we're changing the filters, having them checked every year. It's not always cheaper to get a new building. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bates. Roll call. Oh, no, we did have a roll call, didn't we?
No, you had a motion and a second. Roll call.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis,
Surges, yes.
Tepe,
Pepe, yes.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
passes.
Item I, a resolution authorizing of a contract for Kane County Building Automation System, BAS, and repair services. Do we have a motion?
Sanchez moves.
Sanchez moves,
Surges, second.
Sturgis second. Discussion? Questions? Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis,
Surges, yes.
Tepe,
Pepe, yes.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
passes.
Item J, a resolution authorizing of a contract, authorization of a contract for King County HVAC mechanical maintenance and repair services.
Board moves.
Board moves,
Sanchez seconds.
Sanchez second, discussion. Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Burgess, yes.
Tepe,
Pepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
And item K, a resolution authorizing the King County Energy Consulting and Management Services contract.
Sanchez moves.
Sanchez moves,
Ford seconds.
Ford second, discussion.
Discussion, Surges.
Sturgis,
Is there a dollar amount on this one?
Yeah,
No.
thought it was.
How does that work? We're hiring a consultant without a dollar figure.
Thought there
There
was.
it is.
Or am I just reading something wrong?
Appropriation amount.
I do believe it's renewal of services already in play.
I believe, Shepro, if it doesn't have a dollar amount, then I think it's limited only by the budget previously passed for that department or line item.
I'm questioning whether this is normal or not. I mean, I don't think I voted on something like this.
do we have any other comments?
I don't know what this is.
Ask the chair.
I'm not sure we discussed it that way in, excuse me, admin. We did pass it through admin. I'm trying to recall.
Leonard?
This is Leonard. Mr. Allen, could you give us an idea on what you've spent in this area under this resolution in past years?
I cannot right now at this time. I was not part of that. This was all done prior to my arrival. I can provide further information upon research.
Shepro, I was part of the original medical services agreement, and the amount was quite substantial. And I believe the amounts were locked in, so I don't know whether the renewal is just, they're extending it at the same charges, or whether there are.
Energy.
This is consulting.
Energy.
Consulting.
But it's a renewal of an existing
Yes.
agreement.
I'm just wondering
Yeah.
what that.
You just don't have the agreement.
Well,
Without the
that's very
agreement.
typical.
Yeah, I would move this back to committee and just ask for it to just be tightened up a bit.
All right.
Is there an urgency with respect to this that?
I don't have that information.
It's not here.
All right.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and second. Oh, Surges and Shepro to send it back to committee.
Right, the motion was to send it back to committee?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
that's the motion.
Which committee?
Admin.
Administration.
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Burgess, yes.
Tepe,
Pepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
Ah. Item L, a resolution authorizing extension of a contract for audiovisual services, equipment maintenance and repair.
Moves.
Leonard seconds.
Sanchez moves, Leonard second. Discussion. Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Burgess, yes.
Tepe,
Pepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. Item M, the resolution authorizing a contract for mental health services for the Juvenile Justice Center.
Surges moves.
Surges moves,
Leonard seconds.
Leonard second, discussion. Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Burgess, yes.
Tepe,
Pepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
And N, a resolution authorizing an intergovernmental agreement between King County and the Department of Children and Family Services.
Board moves.
Board moves,
Sturgis second.
Sturgis second, discussion. Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis,
Sturgis, yes.
Tepe,
Happy yes.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
passes.
Oh, a resolution authorizing a one-year contract extension for medical services at the King County Adult Justice Center for the Office of the Sheriff.
Leonard moves.
Hunter moves,
Sanchez seconds.
Sanchez second, discussion. Roll call, please.
Ford.
If I could
Excuse
just
me,
make a
Madam
comment.
Chair.
Just publicly, so everybody is aware, that cost, as we were talking about costs for our budget, is $2,787,744. Annual cost to make sure that our residents of the county jail are in good health.
Mr. Leonard.
You know, another point on that, Madam Chair, which I think it is important that people realize how much these services cost, is this is maintaining the same price as in the past. However, if the population in the jail goes down or goes up, it could be affected.
Absolutely.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis,
Sturgis, yes.
Tepe,
Happy yes.
Berman,
Berman, yes. Thank you, Madam Chair, for that. Item P, a resolution authorizing the law library fee changes. Do I have a motion?
I guess I'll move it. I think the lawyers on the committee should, but I'll move it.
Leonard moves.
$1 increase.
Board second.
Board second, discussion. Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis,
Sturgis, yes.
Tepe,
Happy yes.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
passes.
Item Q, a resolution approving a contract for a water operator for the Judicial Center campus with Sheffer and Roland of Geneva, Illinois. Martin moves. Martin moves.
Board seconds.
Board second, discussion. Roll call, please.
Ford,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
does this have to not to exceed
21,000.
21? Okay, all right, thank you. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
All right.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis,
Sturgis, yes.
Tepe,
Happy yes.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
passes.
R, a resolution authorizing a contract with Clark Dietz for professional engineering services related to the Ogden Gardens Water Trust Water Distribution System. Martin.
Board moves.
Martin moves. Ford second, discussion. Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis,
Sturgis, yes.
Tepe,
Happy yes.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
passes.
And S, a resolution approving purchase of one 2022 tandem axle truck cab and chassis for the King County Division of Transportation.
Leonard moves.
Leonard moves.
Sturgis, second.
Sturgis second, discussion. Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis,
Sturgis, yes.
Tepe,
Happy yes.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
passes.
And item T, a resolution approving purchase of one 2022 single axle truck cab and chassis for the King County Division of Transportation.
Sanchez moves.
Martin moves.
Sanchez seconds.
Sanchez second, discussion. Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis,
Sturgis, yes.
Tepe,
Happy yes.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
passes.
Mr. Chair, on that last one, do they just take like this, like the snow stuff off of the old chassis and put it onto the new chassis? Is that why it's just a chassis?
I assume that's what they do.
Doesn't, I'm just wondering. Good, keep going, keep going. Long day.
Thank you.
Sorry, just curious.
Needed Mr. Frost here today.
Right, they just lifted off.
Mr. Frost could tell us how they do it.
That's correct.
Yes.
Item V. Oh, I'm sorry.
You.
You. Roll call. You. Oh, ordinance amending county purchasing ordinance to update micro purchase threshold. I'm sorry. Do we have a motion?
Did we vote on the
just-
last one?
Yeah, that was my question too.
Did we vote on
We voted on T,
Okay.
that? Okay.
resolution T, we're
And
on
last.
Okay.
ordinance
You-
U.
We have a motion of approve.
Sanchez moves.
Sanchez moves.
Jeffro second.
Pro seconds. This is item U. Discussion.
Can someone describe what the micro, Surges, what a micro purchase is? I'm not familiar with that.
Bill.
It's a threshold issue, right?
Yeah,
Johnson.
Just what's a micro purchase?
Yeah.
This is Director Onzik. As part of the requirements of the federal government regulations for their federal awards, we're required within our purchasing ordinance to define certain categories of purchases. And a micro purchase currently is described as purchases of $3,000 or below. And those micro purchases do not require the solicitation of 3 quotes in order to make such a purchase. It's just required to be reasonable. Anything between 3,000 and 30,000 is considered a small purchase. And a small purchase does require a minimum of 3 quotes in order to make the purchase. And that's according to the regulations for federal awards, which we have designed our purchasing ordinance to be consistent with, so that we're in compliance with the federal regulations regarding federal awards. We've recently learned that the threshold for micro purchases has been increased by the federal government from $3,000 to $10,000. So that would mean that if we were to make this change to our purchasing ordinance so as to be consistent with the federal regulations, then purchases made by the county under $10,000 would not require 3 quotes, but could just be purchased without obtaining all 3 quotes. That would be eliminated as a requirement, and it would be anything between 10,000 and 30,000 that would require 3 quotes if this is approved.
They're just mimicking the federal guidelines.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, Joe.
Roll call.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes, sorry.
Pepe,
Pepe, yes.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
passes.
Item V. An ordinance abating the taxes heretofore levied for the year 2021 to pay debt service on 7,670,000 general obligation alternate bonds, the Riverboat Revenue Alternate Revenue Source, Series 210, 2010 of the County of Kane, Illinois.
Leonard moves.
Leonard moves.
Sanchez seconds.
Sanchez second. Discussion.
I could explain if anybody needs an explanation.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Is this just a housekeeping function where we're moving funds?
Well, it is. It's a housekeeping function in the sense that when we issued the bonds for the 2010 bonds, which were then used as a source of loans to municipalities in the county, when we issued those bonds, it was automatically a provision within that ordinance to automatically levy property taxes to make the debt service. And there was a provision in there if we collected enough other revenue, in which case it's all the payments from all the municipalities. And we also have the backup revenue of the Riverboat Fund, then we do not need to levy the property tax. And so this is abating those. This is the ordinance that abates those taxes.
I believe typically with any alternate revenue bond, the bond ordinance requires you to levy as a condition of the buyers buying the bonds, But the understanding is that as soon as we know that there is adequate other sources,
We abate
you then abate the levy, which is what I think is happening here, right?
That's correct.
Oh, any further discussion?
You might lose another two.
Ms. Bates, did you get that? Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Sturgis, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
passes.
Item W, an ordinance permanently abating the taxes heretofore levied for the years 2021, 2022, and 2023 to pay the debt service on 27,225,000 general obligation bonds, alternate revenue sources, Series 2013 of the County of Kane, Illinois. Do we have a motion to approve?
Leonard moves.
Leonard moves.
Sanchez,
For a
second.
second.
Sanchez seconds. Discussion?
Is that the refi?
Yes, these are the bonds that were paid off by the bonds that we just issued in last month. And so this is permanently abating the taxes that had to do with the bonds that were paid off.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Leonard.
Yes, and one other comment I'd like to make on that is I hope everybody realizes too, because of Mr. Onsik's efforts, we saved $400,000 by doing this.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Sturgis, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
passes.
And X, an ordinance abating the taxes heretofore levied for the year 2021 to pay the debt service on $9,045,000 general obligation alternate bonds, state income tax alternate revenue source, Series 2021 of the County of Kane.
Leonard moves.
Leonard moves.
Ford second.
Ford second. Discussion.
This is the same thing for the new bonds.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Sturgis, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman,
Yes.
passes.
And item Y, a resolution approving the October 2021 claims paid.
Martin moves.
Martin moves.
Sanchez, seconds.
Sanchez seconds. Discussion. Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Sturgis, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
passes.
Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Surges had suggested that possibly we discuss the insurance costs, which he has finalized now, and get a consensus to move it forward. So if it would be all right, I would like him to just give us a brief summary and then we can give him a consensus.
Everything is, thank you so much, Bill. Everything is in your packets. I do want to point out that we are still struggling with the cyber insurance. And while we have some pricing in the packet, the pricing in the packet is in there really as a placeholder. The carriers that are come forward, and Jamie, if I speak out of line, tell me, but they're offering coverage with a $1 million deductible. And that's just simply not something that I'm comfortable with personally and would not recommend. But we are continuing to shop to find that. And I am hearing this. I did speak with the mayors in our area and the village administrators. They have had the same problems. This cyber insurance, yeah, I mean, it's the ransom. It's the ransomware. And I mean, right down to it. And for us to meet the threshold requirements isn't something that we can necessarily do in a timely manner. Like, you know, they want it done tomorrow and it would take us 5 months to make that happen. So that cyber one is still a little bit up in the air. It's in there as a place marker. Everything else is firm. Jamie, do you have anything else? Am I even remotely telling the tale?
Yeah, that's completely accurate. The number that's in there for cyber insurance is the only firm quote we have received for cyber insurance. And even receiving that required a tremendous amount of work on the part of IT. And they have spent some time taking many calls with insurance adjusters and making sure,
Underwriters, yeah.
and underwriters, and making sure we're able to get that insurance at all. But Rich Ryan does continue to work. It's not the policy we want because like Mr. Surges said, the deductible is very high. And we are still working to try to get a more favorable quote, which we will do if we're able to get that. So we are continuing to work with additional carriers that have denied us at this point to see if we can make adjustments to get them to approve coverage. So we're continuing to work on it and hope to have a better number than the number that's on there. But that is the only firm quote we have received to date.
And Bill, as you know, sometimes we're protecting us from ourselves. And in this case, just because they're saying they want it done, doesn't mean we have to like doing it, but it is in our best interest. And I applaud Roger's team for the patience and grace that they've exhibited during this. So.
Chepro comment. The fire districts that I've talked to, including the one I work for, same problem. We got a quote, but the after the deductible, the most they would pay would be $25,000, which is like a waste of time.
Yeah.
So I think it's only a matter of time before nobody's even purporting to write it.
Well, and again, if I may, Ken, I don't know that that's the case. I think that the bar is moving so fast and the technology is moving so fast, and not everybody has the infrastructure in line. And to simply say, hi, I can't give you a price that we can lock more than 45 days, but if you do this, this, and this, but this, and this is a 6-month multi,
No, you're
very
right. I mean,
expensive
the fire
venture to do.
districts generally don't have the staff to
Exactly.
do what would be required to be done, whereas the county.
Right. So
Right,
we're
you're right.
looking at it, and if
Yeah.
it makes sense to do, we will by all means report back to, wherever we need to. But right now, I'm not pleased with this. Rich isn't pleased with it. Jamie's not pleased with it. But it's the only slice of pizza on the plate. So, I mean, take it or leave it. And I think we're going to take it right now, but we will continue to make modifications to that.
So
minute
just
we
to
can.
clarify, when this goes to the county board for a vote, will that be essentially a not to exceed item,
Correct.
but that could end up being 0 if we don't feel the coverage is either available or appropriate.
We received this late yesterday afternoon,
Mhm.
and we're scrambling to get this all put together. And again, this was for discussion here. But the intention is to have this on the agenda for Tuesday's meeting, special meeting. And I don't anticipate anything changing between, the holiday that begins in a few hours and Monday afternoon. So, I mean, in all honesty, it is what it is.
Mr. Chair, what was this is about $2.4 million. What was the cost of this last year or for this year?
Yeah, 2.1. So it's up a couple $100,000.
Oh, so another cost is up a couple $100,000. Thank you, Mr. Surges.
Mr. Leonard?
Yes, I just
I'm sorry,
want,
wait a minute. Are you suggesting that we had anything to do with that?
No, I'm suggesting that we need to increase our tax rate.
Chairman, this is Leonard. I would support us binding this coverage. As Mr. Shepro mentioned, they had $1 million deductible and a $25,000 coverage after that. This is $1 million deductible with $1 million of coverage. So I think we should bind this coverage. We're not going to get anything else most likely. And it's not cheap, but it's a protection that I believe we need.
Absolutely.
Madam Chair?
Just a follow-up question. There's going to be a cost to include the software protection, whatever needs to be done to protect people or protect our use. What does that cost? Do we know?
I don't think we have that evaluation yet. I don't believe my discussions with Roger, and if Roger's here, he can chime in at all, but
I think he was online.
yeah, I believe the discussion is, we don't know what their industry is requesting of us. The multi-factor authentication was expensive, but it was minor in compared to some of the other things that they're asking for. And Vern, you might understand a little bit of this, but I certainly, it goes over my head and I leave it to Roger and his team. But some of the stuff, it's not even a budget factor. It's a timing issue of how soon we could get this, much less what the licensing would be if it requires a different additional product.
Okay.
So Jamie, am I off base on that at all?
That's correct. You're absolutely correct. So yeah, there are some additional things that are not, according to Roger, not cost effective at this time. So that those aren't being pursued at this time, but the things that we could handle the cost of, that IT was able to handle the cost of, like the multi-factor authentication, we have moved forward to be able to bind the coverage that's here.
Mr. Chairman, this is Roger.
That's Roger.
So I'm online. Sorry, folks. The initial changes that were required by the underwriter were for multi-factor authentication for our virtual private network, or people accessing the county from home. So we're implementing that now by the end of the month. That particular project for the actual tokens and software, we've expended $100,000 for that one compliance for access. The other underwriter questions that we've received had to do with email and hosting of email, and some pretty significant changes to how email functions. And we've looked at those, and those are some of the costs that I think would take considerable time and effort. And honestly, I think from a underwriter or from a question, or they can't really explain to us why they think that it would even be an improvement. So some of the questions that they have, I think, need to be challenged with some level of competency and understanding. They don't necessarily have a rhyme or a reason. They're a checkbox on a sheet. And we've gone back and forth numerous times asking them to please explain, what you mean by the 5 words you put next to the checkbox. And some of these things are far more complex than 5 words. And a lot of our hours of conversation have been around, can you define what you're asking for? So I think the insurance industry has a long way to go. And I think that, some of the risk that they've taken in underwriting these policies is, exhibited and demonstrated in their questionnaires. It shows how much understanding there is in the insurance industry about this. So we're working with Rich. We're going to be meeting with him this afternoon to talk about some of the other policies that are available to us and some of the other requirements. If we can do those and it's feasible, we would be making those changes and doing it. But I don't know that it's advisable to make, $500,000 in changes to get $500,000 in insurance. So that's kind of the issue that we see.
And again, Roger, Cliff Surges again, and what doesn't kill you make you stronger, sort of thing. While these are unpleasant, these are all things for our protection. And we can pin it on the insurance industry or an underwriter or a carrier. But honestly, these bad things are happening out there. We see it on the news every other day. This ransomware stuff is out of control and it's big money. And I would hate to ever see, Kane County gets hit with a ransomware thing, but on the other hand, dollars are dollars and you have to be prudent with it. And if our professional is Roger and he's asking why, then I'm going to back him and hold our ground on this and say, this might not be something that we should be doing, that, if there's no point to it. So anyhow, we'll keep you updated.
You're looking for consensus on this,
We are
right?
looking for consensus to move this to the board on Tuesday.
Just a quick comment, Shepro. As I think we've gathered, this is a little more complicated than getting a insurance on your storage locker.
Yes.
I just want to acknowledge the patience and expertise that Mr. Surges has brought to this process. And thank you for delving down into this to the extent that it needs to be.
Thanks.
Well, it takes cooperation with IT also to come up with,
Roger's been wonderful.
yeah.
Honestly.
Any other discussion on this? And the consensus is we support, I
Yes.
feel nobody's against it. All right.
Thank you.
It's brought to my attention that item K, our resolution authorizing the King County Energy Consulting and Management Service contract.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
thank you. Chris Caius, Chairman of the Administration Committee. We passed it through there. My understanding is there may be a timing issue with this, and I'd like to maybe revisit this. I hate to make this meeting any longer than possible, but Jody Woolnick can speak to this item.
Sorry, I'm jumping in here. We do the electric aggregation program for the county, and this is very similar to that. So I just wanted to give the board a brief explanation. Our natural gas contract, we have an aggregate contract for all the natural gas that the county uses that is going to be up in spring. This would be very similar to our electric aggregation, where we have a consultant work with us on the RFP that goes out to various companies to purchase our natural gas supply for the coming years. Because of the timing of this, it would be highly recommended that this move forward to the board. This consultant does not have a dollar figure, as Mr. Sturgis asked. The consultant is actually paid by the therms through that contract, just like the electric aggregation. We have an electric aggregation consultant that helps us with the bidding and process of going through those bids, and then they're actually paid by our energy usage. And so that will come through the board as that contract when that is released in spring.
This was referred to back to committee. I would move to reconsider the vote to refer back to committee.
I'll second. Sanchez.
All right, we have motion to a second.
Shepro and
Sure, I got it.
Sanchez. Moved and seconded, yes.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. So weirdly enough, my door was on.
We're reconsidering K.
Discussion?
I would just also mention that our existing contract, we've avoided a lot of the volatility in the natural gas field for this coming winter. And so we are in a very good position because of our previous purchase of natural gas ahead of time. And so we're looking to do that as well this time around.
So a yes vote would place it back on the agenda for possible action today to forward to executive.
Two roll calls.
So we're saying we have a motion to
Reconsider the vote to refer it, which would be the first order of
then a
business.
motion to.
And then a motion to presumably approve and forward to.
So any other discussion on the motion to
Reconsider.
roll call, please?
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Sturgis,
Sturgis, yes.
Tepe,
Pepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman? Yes.
Okay.
So we have item K, a resolution authorizing the Kane County Energy Consulting and Management Services contract. Martin moves. Martin? Martin moves. Sanchez?
Second.
Second discussion?
Jody, thank you for running up and helping us with this.
Yes.
Sorry, I had to do a little background research first.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis,
Sturgis, yes.
Tepe,
Pepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
Thank you. And item Z, old business.
Oh,
Uh,
you used up the whole
Where
alphabet.
did Chris leave? I see the clock is still.
That's great.
Oh, Chris. Your ladder?
Is on my work order list.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
request unanimous consent to place reports on file.
Do we have unanimous consent?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Executive session, not that I'm aware of. And a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Seconded by Leonard.
Second by
problem.
Leonard. All those in